Hello, and welcome to Sewing for Beginners with your host, Sarah.
Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Sarah. Don't worry, it's gonna be way less formal than that. So go ahead and grab yourself a cup of tea or a cup of bourbon or a cup of milk. This video is long overdue. I get a lot of questions from people who are just starting out in sewing, and that makes me so excited. I'm so thankful that people want to learn about upcycling and kind of reducing their footprint on the world. So I hope that this video can help you in some way, shape, or form. So let's dive right in, shall we? Questions about what machine would be good for a beginner sewer, and I don't know if I would be the best person to answer that question because I haven't used all the machines in the world. I've really only used a couple in my life, but I think the important thing for choosing a sewing machine when you're a beginner is just to get a machine with a lot of different basic stitch settings and a quality machine. My machine is a Brother CS6000i, and I can say that it has not let me down for the 5 to 6 years that I've owned it. It does everything that I wanted to do. It's definitely a great all-around machine. So I would recommend this machine for beginners. I want to tell you about some of the features on this machine that are my absolute favorite and that I think that a lot of other people would enjoy as well. This machine is kind of computerized. This machine kind of helps you avoid beginner type mistakes with different computerized settings. Like if you're doing something that the machine won't like, it's not going to let you do that. One of my favorite features is these 3 very convenient buttons right here. They're super easy access, and I love that they're computerized. So there are 3 buttons at the front of the machine. The first is this gray button with the upwards arrow on it, and I've actually never used this feature before, but what this button does is if you unplug the presser foot, you can use this arrow as your presser foot, so you can press it and it will start sewing automatically for you, which is pretty cool because you can take this machine on the go without having to have your presser foot. The next button is this U-shaped arrow, which is the backwards sewing button. So when you press this, you can either hold it down and press your presser foot at the same time to sew backwards stitches at a quicker speed, or you can opt to just press this button and hold it down and it will sew slowly backwards for you without using the presser foot. The third button is probably my favorite on the machine. It's the button that you press to make the needle come upwards instead of using the wheel on the side of the machine. I absolutely love this feature. It just makes everything so much quicker, streamlined, and less of a hassle. The other little button here is this speed dial, which I am a huge fan of because it lets you control how fast and how slow your sewing will go. So if I put it all the way to the slowest setting and I press the presser foot all the way down, it's going to go as slow as the machine will go. And then if I change the dial all the way to the fastest, when I press the presser foot all the way down, it's going to go super fast. You can do any speed in between, and I absolutely love that because I have used a more basic machine where it's really hard to kind of control the presser foot, and I just really love that feature. Another favorite thing I have with this machine is the easy bobbin access. I absolutely love this. My old machine had the bobbin underneath the machine and it was just a lot of fiddly parts to it, but with this machine it's right on top. It's so easy to get in and out of, and I've never had a problem with my bobbin not winding very easily and simply into the top of my machine with my top thread. For my serger. A serger is a separate sewing machine that provides an overlocking stitch that you might see on hems and edges of fabric to kind of interlock those fraying edges. And it also has a feature where it has a knife, and as you're sewing, it cuts off the fabric, the very edge of your fabric, as it overlocks to make a super clean, professional finish overlocked edge. My serger is a Brother Lock 1034D, very affordable if it's in your price range. It's around $200 on Amazon, and can I tell you, it is worth every penny. It honestly has made my life so much easier and quicker, with doing hems so much faster, and I just love that it provides me so much more freedom within my sewing. Now, if you would not like to purchase a serger, that's totally fine. You can serge without a serger, and I'll show you how to do it. A good way to do this is to use the zigzag stitch on your machine and use it kind of as an overlocking stitch. So taking it on the very edge of your fabric, you can put the zigzag stitch on the edge of your fabric, and it kind of acts as an overlocking stitch to kind of lock in those raw edges a little bit. It definitely won't lock up all of the fraying as well as a serge stitch would, but it's definitely better than nothing. A lot of people ask me why their machine isn't working well with either heavy materials or lightweight materials, and it's because not every needle and thread will work on every type of fabric. It's really important to understand your machine settings and what stitch length and what tension that you want with each specific fabric that you're working with, but it's also really important to understand what size of needle and what type of thread will work on your specific fabric that you are going to work with. Switching out needles is very important. I learned this by breaking a lot of needles and having horrible looking stitches and just everything in between. It's very frustrating. So when you're sewing thicker materials, say denim, you'll want a more heavyweight needle. Probably the heaviest duty needle you can find would be ideal. For example, I usually use one of these and they work perfectly for all types of denim that I've worked on with my machine. You'll also want to sew with a more robust thread. So say a denim thread, which is thicker and just has more strength to it than a regular cotton thread. If you have this combination of needle and thread in your machine, it's far less likely that things will go wrong. So the same thing goes for lightweight materials. You're gonna wanna use a lightweight needle, for example, an 80-12, or even something even more lightweight, but it all depends on what fabric you are working with. I've only recently learned a lot about sewing lightweight fabrics because I've always been too scared to sew with them, but I realized that it's really not that bad if you have all of the correct setup on your machine. I can attest that having the right needle and the right thread and the right tension and stitch, all of that together, knowing all of that before you go into your project will make it so smooth and easy. But with that being said, there are so many different combinations of different lightweight and stretch fabrics, that's a whole nother category, that go with different needles and threads and tensions and all of that. So definitely search online, all of those things before you start your project, and I promise you it'll save you so much frustration. So if you're a beginner, you might be wondering, well, what are some good projects for you to start out with? And I have some good ideas for you. The simplest thing that you could possibly make are napkins or pillowcases. Something super simple in a very simple square shape that's easy to kind of understand the straight stitch on your machine and simply enough how your machine works. Another easy project is an elastic tube top, which I actually made for my very first video on YouTube. It's very simple to do. It gets you involved with elastic, which is actually so fun to work with and very easy to work with once you understand how to do it. And another project that might tie into that is hair scrunchies or hair ties. So that also uses elastic and uses straight stitches and isn't too complicated. A project that I really liked doing myself when I was more of a beginner was an apron, and I didn't have to use a pattern for this. As many of you know, I really don't use patterns at all. So this was fun for me because I could kind of just cut up fabric in any shape I wanted, and it involved a lot of straight stitches, simple stitches with my sewing machine, and I just kind of like added a bunch of fun stuff on it. So I think that would be a great project for a beginner. Other projects could be a tote bag and a circle skirt, which will get you involved more in the math and pattern making that kind of goes into more complicated sewing, but it's not that hard to do. And there are so many tutorials for all of these things I just mentioned online. People also get really intimidated, and some people reach out to me and they say, "You're so good, I'll never be as good as you." And you know, people feel discouraged when they're just starting out. And I totally understand that. Like, you guys didn't see the years of trial and error that I had leading up to this point of where I am today. I am self-taught, so I know better than anyone what it's like to learn from trial and error. It is not easy. Sewing is very frustrating to me sometimes, and it's all about practice. And what I recommend that beginners do is to get clothes, fabric from the thrift store, just cheap, and just to practice on those cheap materials so that you don't waste your money and you're also buying secondhand while you're practicing in case you mess up. And you're also able to kind of get a feel for upcycling and using a garment that already is and kind of just reiterating that into whatever you want it to be, which I think is really fun. So don't get discouraged if you're a beginner. Really, don't get discouraged. Just keep practicing. Just don't feel discouraged, because I've been there and you can do it. For me, really only a few things are essential when I'm sewing literally anything. I don't really own a lot of fancy things, and I've found that I really don't need them. Some of the more fancier things will make your life easier, that's for sure, but you don't need them. So I just kind of wanted to disclose what items that I find essential and what items I find not essential when I'm sewing. The first thing, and probably most important, is good quality sharp scissors. It's so important to have that control over cutting your fabric. Trust me, it will just make your life so much easier rather than just using some very dull scissors that you found in your drawer somewhere. A very basic seam ripper. You're gonna need this. You're a beginner, you're gonna need this. And trust me, I use my seam ripper every single time that I sew. It's essential. You're gonna mess up, and that's how you take stitches out. Pins and long pins. So I actually just recently invested in long pins, which are about 2 inches long, I think. Goodness, they are awesome. I've used the short pins, you know, just like regular pins all of my life. Having long pins is awesome, so I would definitely recommend those as an essential. You're gonna need pins. A fashionary. Now, if you're like me and you love to write things down on paper, see things out before you actually dive into the project, I would really recommend Fashionary. As you guys know, I've been using them since day one, since before I started my YouTube channel, and it's really helped me to kind of quickly get my ideas down on paper and visualize what I'm gonna be doing with my project or my upcycle and how I'm gonna kind of go about that. And a Fashionary is great because it has these very faint figures on the paper, and it makes it super easy to just quickly jot down my ideas. A flexible tape measure. You're definitely gonna want something to measure with. I know ℕ𝕆ℕ says that she doesn't like measuring, which is just, she's a phenomenal human being, but I find it really helpful to measure. And especially having a flexible tape measure, it makes it easier to kind of form around your body and figure out your measurements that are a little bit curvier rather than straight. Fabric chalk or a washable marker. I have also used fabric chalk all of my life, and it's essential for me because it helps me mark things, but then it won't stain my fabric or anything. So fabric chalk, definitely. A basic iron. You don't need any fancy iron. I actually rarely use mine because I'm so lazy. An iron, nonetheless, is very essential when you're sewing, especially if you want to make things look really crisp and professional and neat. And like I said before, you're gonna need different sizes of sewing needles for your machine and different types of threads for each different project that you're gonna do. Now, here are just a few things that I find unnecessary, but that people rave about and love to use when they're sewing. I personally don't. I've never used them and don't find them essential. They're nice to have, but they're not essential. A cutting mat and a rotary cutter. It's kind of like a rolling knife, which is super, super nice for things that are super curvy and it's hard to kind of like get your scissors around those curves. A dress form. I actually only just ordered a dress form. It hasn't come in yet, but I have been pinning clothes to my body for years. And I actually use the trick where I put on a super skin tight bra or a tank top or really tight leggings. If I want to kind of drape something or fit it to my body, I will just pin the fabric onto my leggings and my clothes to see how it fits me best rather than using a very expensive dress form. Sewing clips. I've never used sewing clips. I think that they would be super handy, and I actually just bought some clothespins as a kind of like replacement to those, because clothespins run about like $1 to $4 and sewing clips are like upwards of $20. So I thought I would just kind of try that out. I'll let you know how that goes. And pinking shears. Pinking shears are are the zigzag scissors, and what those do is when you cut, it kind of reduces the frayage of your fabric on that raw edge. Again, I've never used that, but I think that they would definitely come in handy.
Thank you so very much for tuning into our program, and we do hope that you have enjoyed.
I hope that you enjoyed your tea or bourbon or milk, and I hope that these tips might help you. If you have more questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, and if this video helped you, give it a thumbs up, because that would really help me out, and I appreciate all of you, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye guys.